something that's very, very important. It's a story about the Blessed Virgin Mary and her appearances at a place in Portugal called Fatima. Because Jesus is still doing the work of salvation, he sent the Holy Spirit to carry on his mission. But from time to time, he sends us in a very special way reminders. And he chooses to do that very often through his Blessed Mother. A very important apparition of the Blessed Mother occurred to 3 young little shepherds, and they took care of the sheep of their family. They lived in Portugal, and they lived in a place called Fatima. And so the Blessed Mother appeared there in 1917. Now at the time, World War I was going on. It was a terrible war. About 20 million people died. The Pope at the time, his name was Pope Benedict XV, and he began to pray to the Blessed Mother to intervene for peace in the world. He began a novena. Novena means we pray for 9 days in a row for a special intention. So he asked the people to pray to the Blessed Mother for 9 days for the intention of peace in the world. Well, on the 8th day of the novena, that was May 13th, 1917, when the 3 little shepherd children were in a place not too far from their home. This was a little valley, and they called it the Cova de Iri. It seems to mean the little place of peace. The Blessed Mother appears. She used to appear over top of a little tree called a holm oak tree. And the little children were playing, and they saw the Blessed Mother. And she told them that she had come down from heaven to bring a message of peace to the world. And she wanted the children to come for 5 more months on the 13th of each month. She also asked them to pray the rosary every day. She said the rosary, very important. She told them that God had special plans for them, a special task that he wanted them to do. And she asked, would you be willing to do this? And they all said yes. Then people began to hear that the Blessed Mother was appearing. The next month, June 13th, 1917, the children again went to the Cova. A few people came with them. And again, the Blessed Mother reiterated her message that God had special plan for them. Would they be willing to do what the Lord asked? And they said yes. And she asked them to pray the rosary every day again. She told them that she would come back and she would be telling them exactly what God wanted of them. The main vision that the children had actually occurred in July. All of a sudden, the earth opened up and they had a vision of hell. They saw the souls in hell that were suffering there. And they saw some of the fallen angels who were in hell suffering, but they also saw the souls of human beings. When they saw hell, they became very frightened, but they remembered Blessed Mother had said to us that we will go to heaven. Blessed Mother said to them with sadness, she said, you have seen hell where poor sinners go, and it is to save these people that God is establishing devotion to my Immaculate Heart in the world. The Blessed Mother told the children she would grant peace to the world if people accept my message. Blessed Mother was saying that if people followed her request to offer prayer to God, live good lives, not offend God by their sins, and even offer penances and sacrifices and fulfill their daily responsibilities according to their vocations in life, then an era of peace would come to the world. If not, another more terrible war would come, and many nations would be destroyed. Communism is a government where the people in charge did not believe in God, and they were trying to impose that on all the people, not to believe in God. But she said, I will come and ask for 2 important things. Number 1, she said, I would ask for what she calls the communion of reparation. What does that mean? Well, it means that Blessed Mother had been offended by many sins. The Blessed Mother appeared to her one day with the Christ child. And the heart of the Blessed Mother was crowned with a crown of thorns, and these thorns were piercing the heart of the Blessed Mother. And the child Jesus said to Sister Lucia, "You see the heart of your mother pierced by thorns put there by evil men. Who will take these thorns out of the heart?" The Blessed Mother spoke to Sister Lucia and said, "At least you do this and tell anybody who would be willing to go to Holy Communion on 5 first Saturdays of the month, and then go to confession also on that day, or maybe a week before or a week after. Go to communion, and then say a rosary, and finally offer meditating on the other mysteries of the rosary in order to make up for all those who hurt her." And that became known as the devotion we call the 5 first Saturdays. So that was a very important devotion. People still pray that now. I do that myself. I go to confession, make sure that I go to confession within a week before or after the first Saturday of the month, and then I receive Holy Communion that day, end up praying a rosary, and then I spend 15 minutes thinking about all the other mysteries. I pray from my heart to the Blessed Mother to offer my love to make up for those who do not love Our Lady. That's a very important devotion for Saturday of the month. Blessed Mother also said she would come back and ask the Pope to consecrate Russia to her Immaculate Heart. By consecrating means offer it very specially to the heart of the Blessed Mother, for her to take care of it. And that happened in 1984 by Pope John Paul II, who consecrated Russia to the Immaculate Heart of Mary. In the next month, which was August, the children were taken prisoner by a very cruel governor. He lived in a town not far away called Orem. And the governor took the little children, he pretended to be taking them to the apparition site on August 13th. But instead, he locked them up in a car and drove them off to a little prison about 15 miles away. When the Blessed Mother appeared on August 13th, the children weren't there. But later on, she appeared about 6 days later, they believe it was August 19. Blessed Mother appeared to the children. And one of the things she said, which I thought always struck in my mind, was, she said, "Many souls are lost from God because there is no one to pray and offer sacrifices for the conversion of that sinner." September 13th, the Blessed Mother did appear and prepared the children for the October 13th apparition. And this is the one in which the Blessed Mother, when little Lucia had been asking Our Lady, "The people want a sign to know that these apparitions are true." The Blessed Mother said, "I will give you that sign." October 13th, it had rained for a couple of days. The ground was very wet and muddy. People were soaking wet. But there were about 70,000 people who could see what was happening. They saw it from miles around Fatima. The Blessed Mother appeared. And at first, nothing unusual happened. And then Sister Lucia reminded the Blessed Mother, "Mary, what about the sign you're going to give the people for the people to know that these events were miraculous and coming from God?" And you know what happened? The sun began to spin in the sky. It got larger and larger. And then it began to, they referred to it as the sun began to dance in the sky. It was moving so far one way, then the other way. And then you see the people in the photographs, they're looking this way and then this way. This was the sign that the Blessed Mother promised, that there would be something that would happen that would be absolute proof that these apparitions were coming from God. At one point, the people actually saw the sun spinning and coming toward the earth. They thought the sun was hurling itself on the earth, that we would all have been burned to death. And you remember I told you it had been raining for days. When that apparition was over, the people realized all their clothing was dry. So God worked a stupendous miracle. The people had wanted a sign and they received it. And they received the message of Our Lady to pray the rosary for peace, to go to Mass, receive Jesus in Holy Communion, and make reparation to Jesus, to the Immaculate Heart of his mother. Now at the last apparition, one other important thing to mention is, all along Lucia had been asking the Blessed Mother, "What is your name?" And she said, "I am the Lady of the Rosary." And so that's who was appearing. Our Lady was coming down from heaven, Our Lady of the Rosary. And she said to the children, tell the people to stop offending my son, because he's been so much offended. And at the same time, tell the people to live good lives, pray the Rosary, and offer reparation. And she said, many souls will be converted. And when this happens, she said, then an era of peace will triumph in the world. And she said, my Immaculate Heart will triumph. And this is what we are working for as we try to live the message of Our Lady of Fatima. As the world grows more tense, as more and more countries obtain the ability to create nuclear weapons and weapons of great destruction, the message of Our Lady, which was a message for peace, how peace could be won, becomes more and more important. And that's why we can't say, well, 1917 is gone. Pope John Paul II said Fatima is more important now than it was in 1917. And look at how many years later that was. So the message of Fatima has not grown less important. It's grown actually more important. It was a message of peace which begins in our own heart, spreads to our families, our neighborhoods, our parishes, and then we bring it to our place of work, and then hopefully from there we bring it out to the whole world. So we call a message Our Lady's Peace Plan from Heaven. I hope I've explained it and give you something to think about. Thank you.
Army, the World Apostolate of Fatima, was elevated to the status of a pontifical association of the faith, which means that they are recognized by Rome as having official status in the church. So the work of the apostolate then is to promote Our Lady's message. But as Pope John Paul said, that message is more important now than it even was 90 years ago. We see the struggle, it's right before our eyes, it's right there in the world if we look carefully. We can do something about it. That's why the message of Fatima is a source of hope.
In the name of the Father, and of the Son, and of the Holy Spirit, amen. My God, I believe, I adore, I hope, and I love thee. And I ask your pardon for those who do not believe, do not adore, do not hope, and do not love thee. Amen. The reason I start with that prayer is that is the prayer the children learned, the 3 children in Fatima, Portugal, in 1916. And they said it thousands and thousands and thousands of times in preparation to receive the message of Fatima from the Blessed Mother. And it is a prayer that points out how important hope is. If there is faith, if there is love of God, no matter how bad things get, Whether we feel despondent or despair in our lives or in our world, there is hope. And the message of Fatima is a message not for Catholics, but for the entire world. And it is a message of hope for the entire world. So when the Cold War with communism took place, it was the message of Fatima that gave us hope when nobody had an answer. The only answer we had politically and militarily was something called MAD, mutually assured destruction. That meant that the United States and Russia were both able to create as many arms as they possibly could so they could annihilate the entire world. And thus nobody would be stupid enough to do it. However, Khrushchev takes his shoe off at the UN and starts pounding it on the desk over and over again and says, "We will bury you, we will bury you, we will bury you," because he's got the capability at that point to bury us, and he's ahead of us in the arms race. But the power of prayer intervened. It was the message of Fatima that gave us hope, that caused millions and millions and millions and millions of people from throughout the world to join the World Apostolate of Fatima, the Blue Army, and pray daily the Rosary, as Our Lady asked in Fatima, Portugal. And is that praying of the Rosary daily and the act of the consecration of Russia that took place finally in 1984, when Sister Lucia finally said on the third time, yes, it has been done, and heaven has accepted it, that all of a sudden Gorbachev comes in office, and what do we experience? We experience a totalitarian leader with all the power in the world, a politician, and he had a change of heart. That's the power of prayer, to change hearts. That's the power of consecration, to open it up for Our Lady to come in and change hearts. And communism fell without a shot being fired. The communist flag comes down on Christmas Day, and he goes and he visits the Pope. Unheard of, unbelievable for those of you who lived through those times. And what was the number one problem with communism? It was forced Soviet oppression on the Russian people. And I can tell you from experience that the Russian people are wonderful people, but their government forced upon them Soviet oppression and said that you will deny God, you will be atheistic, and government will now become greater than God in your life, and God will become irrelevant. That was the great sin of communism. From that, everything else took place and spread. Russia was the first nation to legalize abortion. And without God, you can legalize abortion logically. With God, you can't. The United States was formed with God in mind. The United States, a statesman once said, is a great nation because it is good. And when America stops being good, it will cease to be great. Our nation was founded with the Declaration of Independence. And the Declaration of Independence says that we are endowed by our Creator, God, with certain inalienable rights. Among those, the right to life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. Inalienable rights, we don't even have to discuss them. Granted by God, the right to life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. Not pleasure. We sort of get confused nowadays and mix that up. Pleasure and happiness. It was a country founded with a soul. It was the greatest way to create a country that has ever existed. God was put first. It was God, country, family. That's the way our country was created. God first, country second, family third. Now, what is the message of Fatima? I'm going to put it simply. Everybody, has a way to put it. I'm going to put it simply. The Blessed Mother came down and she spoke to 3 shepherd children, and she bestowed upon them the most important message for all of mankind. 2 aspects of our humanity here on earth. She taught them, 1, hell exists. Hell exists. Ask our priests not to talk about it at the pulpit, redefine it, decide that it doesn't pertain to anything or anyone, say God would never be so cruel as to send anybody to hell, say what you will. Hell exists, and it was proven at Fatima because the children experienced it. The other message of Fatima of vital importance is war is a consequence of our offenses against God. If we offend God, war is the result. And that's a little hard to swallow, perhaps. But what it is saying is that war doesn't have a military cause, doesn't have a political cause, as much as it has a spiritual cause. And it is our offenses against God that create a situation that results in war. Let me put it in non-theological terms. Those things that we do to please God create positive energy. If all we did were good things, that would be heaven. So of course that's not going to happen here. Those things that we do that will offend God create negative energy. That's not earth, that's hell. But there has to be a balance. There has to be more good than evil. And God knows that we will fail. He knows that we are frail. But the message of Fatima is a message of hope, so she didn't just say hell exists, and she didn't just say war is a consequence of sin. Our Heavenly Mother came down to tell us how to avoid the fire and pain of hell for ourselves, for our loved ones, for our friends, and for others, and how to avoid war. War is so terrible that nations will be annihilated. And she said you can offset that negative energy through acts of reparation, through prayer, through penance, through sacrifice. By putting God first, putting God above self. And if we do that as a nation, and if we do that individually, there will be an era of peace on earth. So peace on earth and the salvation of souls, what could possibly be more important for humanity? She brought us this most powerful message. And the reason we know it's the most powerful message in the world is because God created the greatest miracle since Christ walked the face of the earth to prove that the children were not making this up, that this message was real, and that this message came from God. I hope to show you a film that will make you understand this miracle and the tremendous nature of it and how powerful a miracle it has been. More powerful than any other miracle. So hell exists. War is a consequence of sin. Now the question becomes, how are we doing today? How is America doing today? How is Europe doing today? I can tell you that when I went to secular school, we started our day with, Our Father who art in heaven, hallowed be thy name. Thy kingdom come, thy will be done, on earth as it is in heaven. Thy will be done. Every day we started with a reminder that God's will came first and His will was to be done on earth as it is in heaven. In 1962, not the legislature, but the Supreme Court said, we will no longer allow our children to pray in school. Since then, violent crime among kids has gone up 500%. Assault among children has gone up 500%. murder has gone up 500%. Sex among 13-year-olds has gone up 500%. Teen pregnancy has gone up 750%, and scholastic achievement tests, SAT scores have gotten so low that they have had to redefine how they grade, how the system grades the student. Twice. So a score of 1,000 before, when prayer was in school, has now been raised above once, not once, but twice. Because it's so embarrassing what's taking place in the school system today. Sometimes I take a train from Newark to New York City, and there's a giant billboard, and what the billboard says in big black letters against a big white billboard is, "Stop the killing." Stop the killing. New Jersey Teachers Association. So if you ask, why are our schools in trouble? Why are there such killings in our schools? Ask yourself, did we uninvite God? Did we say, God, you are not allowed in our schools anymore? Our institutions are pulling God out at a rapid rate in a country where almost everybody believes in God and everybody prays. I say everybody prays. People who don't pray, when the bus is coming at them at 60 miles an hour, they pray. Let's take a look at another institution. Let's take a look at our government. Politicians used to have principles. They would make decisions based on principles that were based on God's laws. Now they take polls. The poll tells them what to say in order to get a vote. And sometimes in one day they'll contradict themselves 3 different times in front of 3 different audiences because they want to get all their votes. Why? Because the #1 mantra in Congress today is, keep your job. Keep your job. And get more power. Where are our statesmen today? I have a very close friend who's a congressman, and we spend a lot of time together. And I said to him, I said, John, and John is a very principled man. He's very lonely. He's watched so many of his friends get what they call beltway fever. They start out principled, and then beltway fever takes them, and it becomes keep your job and get more power. And so many of his friends have left because they've been disgusted. And it doesn't matter which side of the aisle you're on. And I said to John, John, it seems to me that government has sort of changed the way they look at America. No longer do we look at it as God, country, family. They look at it as self, country, family. Putting themselves above God, self first, service to self first, keep my job, increase my power. Or maybe self, family, country. And John said, Mike, you are completely wrong. It is not self, family, country, and it is not self, country, family. It is self, self, self. Let's look at our judicial system. When I was young, Bible, right hand, I swear to tell the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, so help me, God. Now, no Bible. I swear to tell the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, so help me, institution. They've ripped the 10 Commandments out of the courthouses. They're sending this signal that we don't want to base our laws, our rules, in our country on God's rules. It's government's rules that come first. They have declared God dead. as they must declare God dead, because how else can they say that a woman who is pregnant in a third term, who has a child that is viable, a child who can live without the mother, a baby who doesn't need the mother anymore, has matured enough, is subject to the mother's decision as to whether or not her convenience is more important than the child's life? You cannot logically come to that conclusion if you believe in God. Perhaps, and only perhaps, you can have a discussion over a couple cells and a logical debate. But how do you debate partial birth abortion? Too disgusting to even talk about. This is the environment our kids are growing up in today. This is the America our kids are growing up in today. Let's just think one generation. Just think of all the changes in one generation. But think back to your youth. Was it Tommy Dorsey? Was it Perry Como? Well, who is it today? Who are the idols today? What's the music like today? What is rap? And what is rap about? Everything that offends God. Sex, drugs, violence, hidden in this language that we just don't understand. Now you take this culture of ours that is pulling our children away from God, and now you export this culture throughout the world. There is no country in the world that exports its culture better than America exports its culture. And it is not a God-based culture anymore that we export, because we export the worst of our culture, not the best. Now, America is a good country. Americans are good people. But this insidious thing is happening during this, what I'm going to call spiritual warfare, that is undermining who we are and what we believe. Because as Americans, we do believe in God. We do pray. We are not evil. We are the first ones to help anybody in trouble. We are a great nation with great people. But it is falling apart in front of our eyes. And we are allowing it to happen. Why? Because unlike Soviet oppression, where a force came in and said, you will be atheist, the heat is slowly being turned up on the frog, if you know that analogy. If you take a frog and you put him in a hot frying pan that would normally exterminate him, he would expire in it, he'll jump right out. But if you put him in the frying pan and turn the heat up very slowly, it'll get to the same temperature, but the frog will never leave and he will expire. I think that is an analogy of what's taking place in America today. And the message of Fatima is what? Spiritual decay, spiritual degeneration results in war. War so bad that nations will be annihilated. Now, what I want to explain to you is how I see the cause of terrorism. Because the message of Fatima, as Pope John Paul II said, is more important now than ever. That's why he raised the status of this organization to the highest status they have within the church. We are officially part of the Catholic Church. And Pope John Paul II asked us to do that because he knows the message of Fatima is more important now than ever, and I think it's because he understands the terrorist threat. And he understands the solution. Terrorism is founded in a strong belief in God. There are 1.3 billion Muslims in the world today. Most of them very good Muslims, very good people. But there is this group and their religious leaders, who are also their political leaders, have taken the culture that we export and used the rhetoric to incite their people. And they incite their people to believe that America is satanic, Israel is satanic, Europe is satanic, our cultures are satanic, and they believe, or they tell their people they believe, it's hard to tell with a politician, they tell their people that God has given them the green light to protect the world from the influence of Satan as seen in America and in Europe and in the spiritual decay that's taking place there, and it is their duty to give up their lives and martyr themselves to destroy that evil within the world so that their children will not be pulled away from God the way our children are pulled away from God. Now, I am not condoning this. This is not right. This is not what God would want. This is what is being said. And it brings us back to the message of Fatima. Spiritual decay will result in so much chaos and confusion and turbulence in the world that it will result in wars so bad that nations could be annihilated, predicted in 1917 before the thought of nuclear weapons, chemical weapons, or biological weapons existed. The terrorists are very God-centered. God is first in their lives. They pray daily often. They wear clothes to please God. They dress, only to please God. They eat a certain way to please God. They face a certain direction when they pray in an attempt to please God as they know Him. And in school they pray. They pray in their schools. They don't allow abortion. And they start their prayer in school with 5-year-olds with death to America, death to America, death to Israel, death to Europe, and then they go on and pray to God. Not the Muslims, but the terrorists. And I don't want you to take my word for it. I'm going to show it to you.
این مرگ بر آمریکایی که مردم ما میگوین، این مثل همون اعوذ بالله من الشیطان الرجیم است که در اول هر سوره قرآن که شما میخواهید بخوانید قبل از بسم الله اعوذ بالله من الشیطان الرجیم میگید. برای چیست؟ برای اینکه انسان مؤمن یک لحظه حضور شیطان را فراموش نکنه، یک لحظه از یاد نبرد که شیطان آماده حمله به او و انهدام حصار معنوی و ایمانی اوست. این مرگ بر آمریکا
It's the dark side of the message of Fatima. The bright side is that we can win this war. We are all Mary's soldiers in this war. We have the most powerful weapon there is, a weapon more powerful than the nuclear bomb, more powerful than a politician gone awry. We have this. All we have to do is use it. So I ask you every time you pray, add the intention for the salvation of souls and to bring about an era of peace. And please, learn the message of Fatima, live the message of Fatima, spread the message of Fatima, help others learn the message of Fatima, live the message of Fatima, spread the message of Fatima, because life on earth and everlasting life is what's at stake. God bless you, and thank you very much.
What if I told you that there's a place where you can learn about a weapon you can wield to bring about world peace? You'd go, wouldn't you?